There's a specific kind of person who walks into a room and instantly feels everything. The tension, the fake smiles, the pain behind "I'm fine." And nobody warns them. That same gift is a target on their back. Because the nervous system that makes you feel everything, makes you bleed everything too. And the people who exploit that, they don't look like predators. They look like they need you. They look like someone only you can fix. And you walk right in. Every single time. What I'm about to share isn't comfortable. This isn't about how special your sensitivity is. This is the conversation nobody had with you before the damage was done, before you handed yourself away piece by piece to people who were never lost. They were hunting. These are the 5 painful truths empaths learn, almost always too late. You were never just sensitive. Let's get that straight right now. What you have, this ability to walk into a room and immediately tune into what everyone else is feeling, that's not weakness. That's not some emotional flaw your family told you to fix. That is a finely tuned human radar system that most people will never have access to in their entire lives. But here's what that radar does when nobody teaches you how to use it properly. It pulls you toward pain, not randomly, not by accident, systematically, like a compass that only points toward broken things. And you follow it every single time because something deep inside you believes that if you can feel someone else's pain this clearly, maybe you were meant to fix it. That belief right there, that's where it all starts to fall apart. Think about the people you've been closest to in your life. Really think about it. How many of them came to you already carrying something heavy? How many of them had a story that made your chest tighten the first time you heard it? How many of them needed something, emotionally, mentally, energetically, that nobody else around them seemed willing to give? Almost all of them, wasn't it? This isn't coincidence. This is a pattern baked so deep into your nervous system that it operates completely below your conscious awareness. You don't choose these people the way most people think you do. Your body chooses them. Your biology chooses them. Because somewhere along the way, usually very early in life, your system learned that love looks like rescue. That connection feels like being needed. That your value to another person is measured by how much of their pain you're willing to absorb. And so your radar stopped scanning for safety. It started scanning for suffering instead. The most dangerous part about this pattern is how invisible it is while it's happening. You're not sitting there thinking, let me find another broken person to pour myself into. You're thinking this person is different. This person is deep. This person just hasn't found the right someone yet, someone patient enough, understanding enough, strong enough to stand beside them while they heal. You think that someone is you, and maybe sometimes it is. But here's the painful truth hiding underneath all of that beautiful intention. Not everyone in pain wants to heal. Some people have learned to live inside their pain. They've built an entire identity around it. And unconsciously, without even realizing they're doing it, they look for someone like you. Someone whose nervous system is so attuned to suffering that they'll stay. Someone who feels guilty for having boundaries. Someone who confuses emotional chaos with emotional depth. Your sensitivity doesn't just attract these people, it signals them. The way you listen, the way you ask the second and third question when everyone else stopped at the first. The way your eyes change when someone tells you something real. These are not just personality traits. To someone who has learned to feed off emotional generosity, these are invitations. And this is what empaths almost never see until years into the pattern, until after the exhaustion has set in, until after they've looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back at them. The pain they kept absorbing was never moving through them. It was staying, accumulating, building a home inside them that was never meant to be anyone else's. You were feeling everything. And slowly, without noticing, you started becoming it too. You were taught that kindness is always a good thing. And on the surface, that's true. Kindness builds trust. It creates safety. It opens doors between people that ego and pride keep permanently shut. Nobody's going to argue with you about the value of being kind. But here's what nobody put in that lesson. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness anymore. It's an open wound. And the wrong people, the ones who have spent years learning how to read other people's emotional generosity, they don't see your kindness the way a healthy person sees it. They don't receive it with gratitude and reciprocate it with care. They see it as access. They see it as a door with no lock. And they walk straight through it like they own the place. This is the part that stings the most. Because your kindness was never fake. It was never calculated. It came from the most genuine part of who you are. That deep, almost involuntary desire to make the people around you feel seen, feel safe, feel like they matter. You weren't performing it. You were living it. Every time you stayed up late listening, every time you swallowed your own discomfort to keep the peace, every time you said it's okay when it actually wasn't, that was real. That cost you something real. And someone else spent it. Here's what the science of human behavior tells us about this dynamic. There are people who move through life as natural givers. Their nervous system is wired toward connection, toward nurturing, toward solving the emotional problems of the people they love. And then there are people, not monsters, not cartoon villains, just people shaped by their own wounds and unmet needs, who have learned, often unconsciously, to position themselves near givers, to stay close to the warmth, to take what they need without ever really asking how much it costs the person they're taking from. They don't do this because they're evil. They do it because it works. And it works especially well on you. Because when someone takes advantage of a person who doesn't care, that person walks away. But when someone takes advantage of an empath, you don't walk away. You try harder. You think maybe you didn't give enough. Maybe you weren't patient enough. Maybe if you just showed up a little more consistently, a little more gently, a little more completely, this time it would be different. This time they would finally feel full enough to stop taking. That thought has kept you in more damaging situations than you probably want to count right now. And the cruelest part of weaponized kindness isn't even what the other person does to you. It's what you start doing to yourself. Because over time, after enough cycles of giving everything and receiving almost nothing, your kindness starts to feel like a liability. You start to resent the very part of yourself that you used to consider your greatest strength. You build walls. You become suspicious of your own generous instincts. You catch yourself being kind to someone and immediately wondering what it's going to cost you this time. That suspicion, that internal flinching away from your own nature, that is the real damage. That is what years of having your kindness weaponized actually produces. Not just exhaustion, not just heartbreak, but a slow, quiet disconnection from the most powerful thing you had. The part of you that could walk into any room, connect with any person, and make them feel, even just for a moment, like the world was a little less cold. That part of you didn't betray you. It was betrayed. And there is a very important difference between those two things that you need to sit with before we go any further. There is a version of you that existed before all of this, before the relationships that drained you, before the friendships that only called when they needed something, before you learned to shrink yourself down to fit into spaces that were never actually built for you. There was a version of you that had preferences, opinions, dreams, edges, a person who knew what they liked and what they didn't, what felt right and what felt wrong in their body before anyone else's feelings entered the room. Do you even remember that person? Because here's what happens to empaths that nobody talks about openly. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no single moment where you wake up and think, I've lost myself. It happens the way water shapes a rock, slowly, consistently, so gradually that you don't notice the change until one day you look down and realize the rock looks completely different from what it used to be. You start making small adjustments, tiny ones. You tone down your excitement about something because you can feel the other person isn't interested. You stop mentioning certain dreams because every time you bring them up, the conversation somehow shifts back to the other person's problems. You change the way you dress, the music you listen to, the opinions you voice out loud, not because you want to, but because keeping the peace has slowly become more important than keeping yourself. And it feels like love while it's happening. That's the part that makes this so incredibly hard to see in real time. The erosion doesn't feel like loss. It feels like compromise. It feels like maturity. It feels like you're becoming a better, less selfish, more understanding human being. Because you've been taught your whole life that putting others first is a virtue. That sacrifice is noble. That the measure of how much you love someone is directly tied to how much of yourself you're willing to give up for them. So you give, and you give, and you give. Until one day someone asks you a simple question. Something as basic as, what do you want for dinner, or what kind of music are you in the mood for? And you freeze. Not because the question is hard, but because somewhere along the way you genuinely stopped knowing the answer. You've spent so long tuning into everyone else's frequency that you've completely lost signal on your own. That is identity erosion. And it is one of the quietest, most devastating things that happens to an empath in long-term relationships with the wrong people. What makes it even more complicated is that the people causing it often have no idea they're doing it. They're not sitting somewhere scheming about how to erase you. They're just endlessly, consistently, exhaustingly focused on themselves, their needs, their feelings, their narrative, their version of every story. And because your nervous system is naturally oriented toward other people, you just follow their lead. You tune into their channel. You make their reality the center of gravity in the relationship. And your own reality starts to drift, slowly at first, then faster. Then one day it feels so far away that reaching back for it seems almost selfish. You start to feel like a supporting character in your own life. Like the story is happening around you, not through you. You show up for everyone else's big moments with your whole heart. But your own big moments, your own needs, your own grief, your own joy somehow always end up in the waiting room. Always almost important enough to address. Never quite making it to the front of the line. And the loneliness that comes from that specific experience, being surrounded by people who need you, while feeling completely invisible as a full human being yourself, that kind of loneliness doesn't have a clean name. It doesn't look like loneliness from the outside. From the outside, you look connected. You look needed. You look like the person everyone leans on. But inside, you are slowly disappearing. And the most painful part is that for a long time, a very long time, you convince yourself that disappearing is the same thing as being devoted. Let's talk about guilt. Not the kind of guilt that shows up when you actually do something wrong. Not the healthy, functional kind that taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, you made a mistake, go fix it. That kind of guilt makes sense. That kind serves a purpose. That kind is your moral compass doing exactly what it was designed to do. I'm talking about a different kind entirely. I'm talking about the guilt that shows up when you haven't done anything wrong at all, the guilt that floods your system the moment you try to say no, the guilt that makes you lie awake at 3 a.m, replaying a conversation where you finally stood up for yourself, wondering if you were too harsh, too cold, too selfish. The guilt that makes you apologize for having needs. The guilt that makes your own boundaries feel like crimes you committed against someone else. That guilt. The one that has absolutely no business being there. That's the one that owns you. And here's the thing about empaths specifically. That guilt doesn't just visit, it moves in. It unpacks its bags. It makes itself completely at home inside your nervous system because your entire emotional architecture is built around sensitivity to other people's pain. So when someone in your life is hurting, even if that hurt is a direct result of their own choices, even if that hurt is being performed specifically to manipulate you, your body cannot tell the difference. Your nervous system fires the same way. Your chest tightens the same way. The urge to fix it, to smooth it over, to do whatever it takes to make that person okay again, and it rises up just as powerfully whether the pain is real or manufactured. And the people who have learned to exploit empaths know this. Maybe not consciously. Maybe not with full deliberate awareness of what they're doing, but on some level, through years of getting what they need through emotional displays, they have learned that your guilt is a lever. And all they have to do is pull it. It looks different depending on the person. Sometimes it's loud, tears, outbursts, dramatic declarations about how much your boundaries hurt them, how nobody has ever made them feel this abandoned, this unloved, this alone. Sometimes it's quieter and far more insidious. The long silence, the cold distance, the withdrawn energy that wraps around a room like smoke and makes you feel responsible for clearing it even though you didn't start the fire. Either way, the result is the same. You fold. You go back. You apologize for something that didn't require an apology. You shrink the boundary down to almost nothing just to make the discomfort stop. And the moment you do, and the moment they see that the lever still works, the pattern locks in deeper. Because now they don't just know your guilt is accessible. They know exactly how hard to pull and exactly how long to wait before you break. What you need to understand, and this is something that takes most empaths years to fully absorb, is that feeling guilty and being guilty are two completely different experiences that your body has been treating as the same thing your entire life. The feeling is real. The sensation in your chest, the anxiety, the desperate urge to fix someone else's emotional state, all of that is real. But the feeling being real does not mean the guilt is deserved. You can feel guilty for saying no to someone who has taken from you for years. That guilt is real, and you still didn't do anything wrong. You can feel guilty for finally choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. That guilt is real, and you still made the right decision. You can feel guilty for walking away from a relationship that was slowly hollowing you out from the inside. That guilt is real, and leaving was still the healthiest thing you could have done. The guilt is not evidence. It is not a verdict. It is not your conscience telling you that you failed someone. For an empath, someone whose nervous system is wired this deeply toward other people's emotional states, guilt is often just what freedom feels like at first. It's the sensation of your body trying to pull you back to familiar patterns because familiar, even when it's painful, always feels safer than unknown. And the people in your life who are worth keeping are the ones who actually love you in a healthy and reciprocal way, and they will never use that guilt against you. They will never make you feel like your basic needs are a burden. They will never position your boundaries as betrayals or your self-respect as selfishness. The ones who do that aren't loving you. They are managing you. And there is a profound and life-changing difference between those two things that your guilt has been working very hard to keep you from seeing clearly. There is a specific moment that almost every empath eventually reaches. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with dramatic music or a sudden flash of clarity that makes everything instantly make sense. It comes quietly, usually in an ordinary moment. You're standing in the kitchen making coffee, or sitting alone in your car in a parking lot, or lying in bed staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, and something shifts. Something underneath all the noise and the giving and the managing and the fixing just goes very, very still. And in that stillness you see it. Not everything all at once, but enough. Enough to understand that something has been deeply wrong for a very long time. Enough to recognize the pattern you've been living inside of. Enough to feel simultaneously the grief of what you've lost and the first fragile flicker of something that might eventually become clarity. That moment is the late awakening. And for most empaths, it arrives after years, sometimes decades, long after the relationships that hollowed them out have already done their damage. Long after the energy has been spent, the trust has been broken, the identity has been quietly eroded down to something almost unrecognizable. The awakening is real, and it is powerful, and it is necessary, but it almost always comes with a particular kind of pain attached to it that is unlike anything else you will ever feel. The pain of finally seeing clearly while standing in the middle of the wreckage. Because when you wake up late, when the understanding arrives after so much has already been lost, the first thing that hits you isn't relief, it's grief. Deep, complicated, layered grief that doesn't just mourn the relationships or the people or the time. It mourns the version of you that went through all of it without knowing what was happening. That version of you who kept trying harder, kept giving more, kept believing that if you just loved the right way or said the right thing or became the right version of yourself, things would finally shift. You grieve for that person, and that grief is completely legitimate. But then something else starts to happen underneath the grief, slowly, unevenly, with plenty of setbacks and moments where the old patterns pull you right back in before you even realize you've moved. Underneath the grief, something starts to rebuild. Not the old version of you. That version has already been changed by everything you've been through, and it is never coming back exactly as it was. Something new starts to form, quieter than before, more careful. But also, and this is the part that surprises most empaths, stronger. Because here's what the late awakening actually gives you that the early version of yourself never had. It gives you evidence, not theory, not someone else's warning, not a book you read or a video you watched. Real, lived, bone-deep evidence of exactly how your patterns work, exactly what they cost you, and exactly what kind of people and dynamics you can no longer afford to participate in. That evidence changes everything. It changes the way you read people. Not in a cynical, closed-off, trust-nobody kind of way, but in a grounded, clear-eyed, I know what I'm looking at kind of way. You start noticing things earlier. The subtle dynamics that used to pull you in before you had the language to describe them, you see them now. The person who only reaches out when they need something, the relationship where the emotional labor only ever flows in one direction. The guilt that arrives right on schedule the moment you try to hold a boundary. You see it. And seeing it gives you something you never had before inside those moments. A choice. Not a perfect choice. Not an easy choice. But a real one. And for someone who spent years feeling completely pulled by invisible emotional currents, who gave and gave and gave because it never felt like there was any other option, having a genuine choice is not a small thing. It is everything.